And I love Charlie. I have immense respect for Charlie and Stan. I like Stan Garnett. He's the first DA up there with some teeth, and I thought it was just fascinating. I said, wait a minute, Charlie helped him get elected, and now I'm a big fan of Tom Kelly. Tom Kelly bailed me out of a couple, but they're suing him now. So I thought that was fascinating.
Actually, Charlie helped Stan get his ass kicked by John Suthers.
That's right. That's right.
That Stan Garnett won the Boulder DA's job very quickly thereafter, ran for AG.
That's right.
But Stan is accessible. He was always on our show, and he told us some fascinating things that I think have led us to this day. An interview Dan and I had with him back in 2010.
Example.
You know that Mary Lacey exoneration? Stan said, that don't apply to me.
She doesn't have the authority to do it.
No. That was, in my opinion, because her lawyers, I think, implicitly kept threatening to sue me unless I shut up.
They just threaten to sue all of us all the time.
Yeah. I mean, in my opinion, that was such an abuse of her position to go out there and do that. And her reasoning never made any sense. It wasn't logical.
I talked to Big Guy and I were talking about this last night. All right, so she's the DA. You know that she has access to this grand jury vote.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so now she finds that the grand jury wanted to indict John and Patsy, yet she goes out there. Not only with that knowledge, but she and Michael Tracy literally invent John Mark Carr, and she goes out and exonerates the Ramseys with full knowledge that the grand jury wanted to indict them for murder. I think that she should. I mean, I don't know what you can do with someone like that, but.
Well, I'm personally pissed because I could not believe that any DA would be that irresponsible or stupid.
Come on.
You thought that was possible, and Dan Kaplis, who had studied Mary Keenan for quite a while, thought it was possible. So I am pissed because she took me in. Why would you extradite a guy from Thailand on this kind of case, create a media sensation, just to fall flat on your face way she did?
But that was invented by a guy by the name of Michael Tracy, who his own students have voted him no confidence up at CU, but somehow.
But how stupid do you have to be taken in by Michael Tracy?
Mary Keenan is not joining Menza next week.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things there, Pete. One is you have to want to be taken in. And I think we've all seen it happen. I mean, sometimes prosecutors, now Craig's one of the best ever, but I think sometimes prosecutors, people who practice law, maybe people who practice medicine, just develop such a personal attachment. In this case, I think Mary Keenan and Mary Lacey developed this personal attachment to the Ramseys. It clouded her judgment, and she went out and undermined not only her position, but justice, ultimately.
Oh, yeah. But she was involved in so many bizarre decisions up at CU. I mean, she really was.
Right. That's where Dan... Dan, why don't you tell that story? Because nobody followed those antics at CU better than I have. And the other thing, Pete, maybe we have older demographic, but I had a kid, and Dan represented a lot of CU students. I was going to court with a CU student. If you can believe it, they occasionally get accused of things. And I was talking to him about Jean Benet and this, and he's like, "Oh, who's Jean Benet?"
Yeah, maybe we should do that again.
You know what? Just because it's passed so far, but I bring it up because Dan is Mr. University of Colorado, and that's how he came to, I think, appreciate what Mary Keenan Lacey was all about.
Horrible. Let me quick do this. I think most people do know the story, but a beauty pageant queen murdered in her home in Boulder, 1996. She was then sick. She was found in the basement of the family home. My personal belief is her mother's directly responsible. Her father's involved in the cover-up. Law enforcement agencies, I don't even know where to begin with this, but it finally gets to this grand jury because Bill Owens wanted the grand jury. If you look back, I think that, well,
he was a force.
He was a definite force in this. And Bill Owens orders a grand jury, and they have to do it. And they brought in guys they brought in a team in. Didn't Owens bring a team in?
Right, but just think in the backgrounds of Mary Keenan Lacey, who is in that office, and all of a sudden Alex Hunter is kind of being taken off the case by successive governors. Yeah. Romer intervened a bit, and then Bill Owens told the Ramseys to come out from behind their lawyers.
I remember that.
And the three prosecutors appointed Mike Kane, who I worked with in the Denver DA's office, Mitch Morrissey, who I, of course, worked with there as well, and Bruce Levin, who's gone on from Adams County to Denver. But behind the scenes is this lady, Mary Lacey. And, Dan, how did you size her up?
Well, it might take, and again, Mary and I go back to, I think we came into the practice of law together. I mean, I was sworn in 30 years ago, Halloween, appropriately. And so I've known her, I think, since we were both baby lawyers. And my take on her was always, I liked her. I thought she was a good, competent lawyer. And then all of a sudden, she got crazy on 2 cases. She got crazy on that CU stuff and labeled all these kids rapists when the evidence didn't support it, and she knew she couldn't bring the charges. And then in the Ramsey case, she goes out and undermines justice, undermines any possible prosecution to take them off the hook. So I don't know where it got goofy for her, but it got goofy.
Remember the fish wrap story where, I mean, and I remember this so well, that she had to come all the way down to the office to dump off fish wrap because, remember, they barbecued fish, she and the guy I think she married. So they drive all the way from her house to throw the fish wrap in the dumpster because she went in the building. I mean, everyone knows that she passed into the building. It was on a Saturday night. Yeah. She was snooping around. I mean, she's bad news. And any time, Mary, that you have a problem with that, for heaven's sakes, it's like, remember the Ramsey's lawyer who was in Georgia, who was always he was always threatening to sue all
Lynn
of us?
Wood.
Yeah. Lynn Wood.
Yeah.
Wonder where Lynn Wood is this morning. Yeah. Wouldn't you love to call him?
Well, we may get a call from him. I think we've all experienced that call. And I've experienced pressure calls. We all have in this case.
This guy right here, I mean, on a couple of big showdowns in some boardrooms, and when the book is written, and I said, is this guy going to sue me, Danny? And he went, no.
Can I digress for one quick second? Just because it ties into all of the efforts that have been brought upon you over the years, and Craig and me and others in the business, to stop us from telling the truth.
Oh, of course.
And it was about a week before my wedding in 1994. And I was called into the office of the city attorney in the Webb administration, and I was harangued, I mean, verbally, for 4 or 5 hours.
Well, you witnessed it with me that time.
They looked me in the eye and they said, we're going to ruin you. We're going to destroy you. And they were trying to back me off an investigation I was doing into DIA and whether the people had been lied to. And we were right in our investigation, and they threatened to sue us, and it was just such blatant intimidation. But to the credit of Lee Larson,
that's right,
he never backed down.
He won't.
He never backed down.
Which is such a switch head from today, but...
And that involved the grand jury as well. If you remember, the grand jury met and then they leaked, and I talked about it as part of my campaign, so there's some odd similarities to Jean-Benet.
You remember the day that you had to come with me, and we went in there, and there were some very high-ranking people.
Oh, yeah.
And they were coming after me, and the guy said, you took my name in vain, and I said, who are you, Jesus Christ? And the whole room blew up. And Kaplis was sitting right next to me, and Danny's got his hand on my leg. Don't say it. It was
always interesting.
That was a great one. The guy said, you took my name in vain. We won't name who this person was, but I said, he was very prominent. And I said, who are you, Jesus Christ? I can take your name in vain. And the guy blew. Danny's holding my leg.
Yeah, there's been pushback. And that Lynn Wood call, you get that Georgia drawl.
Yeah.
You are not going to talk about the Ramseys again, or this or that. And I got some pushback from the prosecutors who did not like me coming on Peter Boyles and telling the grand jurors their rights to control their own grand jury.
I remember doing a television show sitting next to Danny, and Danny looked up at the camera and said, hey, Lynn, sue me. I remember that one.
Sue you or sue Dan?
Yeah, no, he just said sue me. He said sue me.
And so, if he sues you, Dan gets the work, and it's not that bad.
But Danny said sue me. Like me, not me, but sue him.
We are entitled to our constitutionally protected opinions. I mean,
by the way, so we've come to this, and it's 15 after the hour, and these are the guys: Dan Kaplis, Craig Silverman, together, Peter Boyles, 710 KNUS. Coming up, we have on the show today Brad Metzler. I'm a huge fan, and he's done a book on conspiracies, and then 2 other people who are deeply involved in the story: Carol McKinley, certainly, and Julie Hayden. And the turns in the story today: John Ramsey. Now, this is according to the Morning Rocky Mountain News, has objected to Boulder District Attorney Stan Garnett submitting any secret grand jury indictment to his daughter's case to a judge to review and release. And now he has Hal Haddon, who was his original lawyer, I believe.
That's right. And the attachment to that letter, the exoneration by Mary Lacey.
There it is. And so here's my response to Mr. Haddon. I'm sure he or his minions are listening. This is John and Patsy Ramsey's book called Death of Innocence that they had to hustle and find a religious – nobody would touch their book, and this religious publishing house did and said because they professed Christianity, they got to publish their book. Hal, go get your client's book, page 357. This is your client. The battered justice system had creaked and shuddered, but it had worked. we had not been indicted.
Wow.
People would have to finally see the jury's decision as our vindication.
Ooh.
Whatever time has been lost with the grand jury hearing must be made up quickly. Page 359, 2 pages later. John Ramsey. After looking at all the evidence, or lack of it, a grand jury of our peers has not indicted Patsy and me. It seems the system has functioned as our Constitution had intended. We are truly grateful. What's the truth? They were indicted.
Well, I'll tell you, I was at that court hearing where Chief Trial Deputy Sean Finn made the argument to Judge Lowenbach on Friday, October 11th. He said, it's not an indictment because Alex Hunter wouldn't sign it. Now, Mimi Wesson and Tom Kelly got up and said, yes, it is.
Sure, it's an indictment.
Once it's a true bill, once the grand jury signs it's a document. And you know what, Judge?
Oh.
Alex Hunter had no right to suppress that information. He had a right not to sign it, but he broke the law when he refused to make it public. And not only did he not make it public, he tried to actively mislead the public and people like you and me.
And Mary Lacey continued. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you know what was interesting about that is it was one of the toughest things I've ever had to do because I got a call at the time that all came down, and I was told they had indicted, but I was told that I was sworn to secrecy under penalty of
whatever.
Yeah. And so I could never tell anybody, even my wife, but which was kind of a maddening position to be in. Mm-hmm. But I completely agree with Craig's analysis, and he certainly knows the criminal justice system better than anybody. So what do you think? I mean, at this point, the judge is going to order the release of it, right?
Has to.
I think so. Yeah. There's a retired Weld County judge, and Stan Garnett, I think it's a winky lawsuit. I think he wants it released. I think he wants to turn up the heat on one of the parents of JonBenet Ramsey, and only one is alive. And you know what? That little girl was not the victim of child abuse resulting in death. Certainly that, but that garrote was put over her tiny head and slowly twisted, and she was strangled by ligature. And that's as deliberate a first-degree murder as there can ever be, and that has no statute of limitations.
On our website this morning, 710knus.com, we have all this. We got this bootleg to us yesterday, and it's the position papers of the court and other things, and it's up for you to read. When you read it, especially the cop side of it, the cops are saying they're okay with this being released because they're not chasing another suspect.
Right.
They know. I mean, the only persons that are creating these other suspects are, I guess, Hal Haddon and Brian Morgan and Mary Keenan Lacey and maybe Alex Hunter, and I guess a couple idiots on the internet, and maybe Paula Woodward. But that's about it, guys. I mean, and by the way, have you heard the rumor Paula's book is coming? Paula Woodward has done a book about the media.
Hey, I'll buy it.
I've spoken to her. I haven't seen it yet, but she talked to me about JonBenet and whatever. Look, you can follow.
Just must have lost my number.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, I don't know if she wants to be hung up on Peter, but you two are getting a fight in about 10 seconds on this game.
I'd love to talk to her about what she thinks happened.
Well, the one thing we know is that Mark Beckner, the guy who came out, as I recall, I was with you on that hill. There was that conclave of prosecutors. You were having some heart problems, right?
Yeah, right before
when that happened, right before you got fixed. And Beckner came out and put the Ramseys under the umbrella of suspicion. Remember, Tom Kobe had been replaced.
Shaking the Constitution at us.
Beckner has always thought it was the Ramseys. And that's why Mary Lacey took the case away from the Boulder police, because she knew how they felt.
Remember that idiot shaking the Constitution? He was the chief of police. And he
Tom Kobe.
Tom Kobe.
At some point today, Pete, I hope I can give you again my theory that I laid out there soon after it happened,
right after this.
And I still believe in more than ever.
Do it right after this. All right, everybody. Dan and Craig are here. The Ramseys are back in the news, and the Ramsey is back in the news. John Ramsey. Patsy's gone, of course, and we're talking if JonBenet were alive. 23 years old. It's incredible. All right, Dan, do you want to make a case for something?
Yeah, listen, from I think it was early 97, Pete, once we started to learn through the media what some of the evidence was in the case, I developed my own working theory of the case, and I've believed it from the beginning. I believe it now more than ever. And again, it's all opinion, obviously, and I've never had access to facts that the public doesn't have access to. But bottom line, what I think likely happened here is I think there was likely both an insider and an outsider involved. I think this was a fake kidnap attempt gone bad. The movie Ransom was out at the time. You guys may remember it. It was a big hit. Mel Gibson
sure.
as
Renee Russo.
Right,
I focused on her more than that other guy.
It was a big hit, and the whole idea was that Mel Gibson's character was this big, successful gazillionaire, and then they kidnapped his kid, and he brilliantly and courageously engineered the safe, successful, healthy return of his child. Yeah. And I won't get into all the detail now, but when you look at some of the evidence in this case, and I think, Pete, there is obviously powerful evidence of an insider, and there's some evidence of an outsider. And then when you look at some of the stuff the public hasn't focused on that much, like John Bonet being told in advance that she was going to get a special visit from Santa Claus on Christmas night, I just think there's a real possibility here that, Patsy, God rest her soul, but I think she obviously, reveled in the attention her daughter received. And I think, engineer this fake kidnapping, they become world famous, get her back, and I think something went wrong in the process.
Wow, that's fascinating. Dan has stated it before, and it could be right on. And I think, Peter, do you believe that it was Patsy or John?
Patsy.
Okay.
Dan and I, we had a dinner one night where there was all these people in a big table, and it was just me and Dan talking because we talked about that.
Everybody else loved that.
Right, and I get it. And I get it that Patsy she had cancer. She was turning 40. She was a beauty queen. She wanted her daughter to be famous. That's obvious. They had the photos ready to go. Yeah. And she ended up being famous. But what do you think the role of John was?
I think John found out in the middle of the night, or she woke him up and told him.
What do you think, Dan?
I don't think he was involved in any way.
I do.
But don't you think he could figure it out?
Oh, sure. But I think he made it. I think he's a reptilian. I think he's I think he's corporate. I think his blood runs cold. I think they just made a corporate decision.
But who would cover up that kind of crime? Even, you love your spouse, but not if they kill the kid.
The biggest mistake you can make in life is think the other guy thinks like you.
Well, that might be part of the problem because John Ramsey had led a fairly exemplary life. I mean, he had a big business. He had never been in trouble with the law.
It doesn't mean anything. The biggest mistake, if you look historically in our lifetime, Lyndon Johnson actually thought Ho Chi Minh thought like he did. Somehow George Bush thinks that these people in the Middle East think like he thinks. They're not true. And so for you to think, and I know how both of you guys with your children, I know how you are, but you're putting your feet or his feet into your shoes. And what I'm saying to you is you can't do that. He found out, this is personal belief, she wakes up and the kid's a bedwetter and a bed defecator. It wasn't just wetting the bed, it was defecating the bed. It was the only thing she had left to control in her life. And so she goes down in the middle of the night with the 6-cell flashlight, which is the murder weapon, goes down and the kid runs from her. And she hits a little girl in the back of the head. It's an accident.
Right, but that's a different version than Dan has.
I know, of course it is. And then she begins this process. But as you know, she answers the door for the cop. Same clothes she had on the night before at the Whites.
Who does that?
Well, especially somebody who's a beauty queen like Patsy.
Right, and she's going to fly to Michigan, has to get the family ready. It doesn't make any sense.
And the 911 that's off the hook when she calls, and they can hear that Burke Ramsey comes downstairs, right, and they tell him to go back to bed, and the stuff that Priscilla White said about the kid in the car.
But Peter, Dan, who fashioned that garrote? Who put it around her neck? Who twisted it until she was dead?
It was Patsy's paint box.
I know, but she did all that?
Oh, she's more than capable.
Do you think so, Dan?
Well, again, I have that insider-outsider theory.
So do you think it was the outsider who did that?
Well, listen, and maybe you guys can tell me, but my understanding is there's still some unexplained DNA, on her clothing.
They went all the way to the plant in China that made those underwear. Yeah. And
right, the argument is either the DNA is a revealing clue or it's some form of contamination that means nothing.
That's right. If you guys are a lot smarter than I am, and Lady Justice wears a blindfold, and I've asked people to do this. Take all the evidence that on one scale that says Patsy and John did it, and all the evidence that says they did not. Which way is that scale going to drop?
Well, sure, but then, Pete, I think that ignores the beyond a reasonable doubt standard. So, and I know you're not talking here in terms of proof in a courtroom necessarily, but just, hey, who done it?
She did it.
But all I'm saying, listen, I think there's overwhelming evidence that an insider was involved here. I just think there's some credible evidence that an outsider was also involved. And if you have both, to me, the only theory that would make sense is some sort of
didn't they find
fake kidnapping.
The high-tech footprint, which they later proved they knew where that came from. There was a shard of glass and a footprint in the snow. Pal, nobody went in that house. They came home.
The spider web intact.
Nobody came through that window. When they came home from the Whites, that little girl ate pineapple. Now,
right.
I remember their official story is she was sleeping in a car. They carried her to bed and put her to bed. And they find her the next day. She's dressed in totally different clothes. The bed's been stripped. The sheets have been washed.
It looks like she's been redressed after something had happened to her.
But the outsider, Pete, could also, as you well know, have been in there for quite some time. I mean, could have been in there for 24 hours or more hiding somewhere. And I'm not claiming to know. I'm just saying that that if you just follow all of what appears to be the available evidence, that other possibilities
and that's
out there.
the cool thing, because we're geeks for this evidence, and we followed it as closely as possible. But the people who really got to hear the evidence was the Boulder grand jury,
and they
and they heard sworn testimony. And the thing is, and I wondered about this at the time, why didn't John and Patsy testify? And it appeared that Alex Hunter didn't even subpoena them to testify.
No, he didn't. Remember Crazy Aunt Pam?
Yes.
The great trivia question, there's only been sister teams winning Miss America in 2 different states. And, of course, Patsy and her sister Pam were Miss West Virginia. And the other state, trivia question, what was the other state? Arkansas. My father used to have a joke, why do girls quit school in the 8th grade in West Virginia? Go to Arkansas, teach high school. But so they had, and the whole family, remember the Paws? Remember Ma, Pa, and Papa and Crazy Aunt? Crazy Aunt Pam I can't wait to get in front of that grand jury. She wanted nothing to do with going to that grand jury.
Go
ahead, I'm sorry.
You know where they invented toothpaste?
Yeah, because
Arkansas, or it would have been teeth paste. Yeah, sorry, no, my apologies. Yeah.
We'll beat everything.
Wow.
But the Ramseys.
Bill Clinton was president.
It shows me. If you think about this case, and it was blown badly by the Boulder PD, tragically, and then there were guys whose lives were ruined over this story, totally ruined.
But think about that, how everybody talked about the contaminated crime scene, Lindart, this and that. But there were so many clues in the case, and the remarkable thing